Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, I'm Sala and I love making miniatures for my Barbie's dollhouse using mostly cardstock. In today's video, I'll show you how to make this set of miniature cups and mugs for your dolls, and as always, I have free printable templates to help you make your own versions. You'll find all the infos and the download link in the video, so now let's begin. We'll start with this little espresso cup since, well, it's the easiest one to make. First, we'll have to cut this part, and I suggest using cardstock from old packaging for this, since it's fairly thick but very easy to cut. You can use a cutting machine like the X-Tool M1 Ultra that I'm using today if you own one, or just scissors, and in that case, for small rounded shapes like this one, I suggest using a pair of manicure scissors with curved blades. We're gonna have to stack the 3 circles together this way. Then we'll have to cut this strip, and for this part I recommend using a lightweight type of cardstock since it's softer and easier to shape, and I'll be switching between these two materials throughout the project, so check the top left corner to see which one I'm using each time. To make the cardstock even more malleable, we're gonna press it against a wet sponge this way. Then we'll use something like the handle of a paintbrush to give the strip a rounded shape. Next, we'll cut this part into copy paper and we'll use it to connect the 2 ends of the strip this way. After that, we're gonna cut this strip. Once again, we'll wet it with water and roll it around a paintbrush to give it a rounded shape, and then we'll glue it around the first little ring like this. At this point, we can assemble these 2 parts together this way. Then we'll have to cut this part a few times and we'll glue all the layers together to get to a thickness of roughly 1 mm. And I've gotta admit, one big reason I wanted to make this project was to see how the M1 Ultra handles such tiny pieces. Full disclosure, it took a few tries with different settings, but eventually I found a perfect balance of force and speed, and I'm super happy with the results. We're gonna glue the resulting little handle to the mug this way. Then we can cut this part twice and we'll press both layers against the wet sponge so that they're a little softer. Next, we're gonna use a big dotting tool or anything that has a round tip like the cap of a marker to press the center of the little cardstock rings. This will give them a slightly spherical shape. We'll have to glue 2 rings together. Then we'll cut this small disc and we'll glue it to the bottom of the 2 rings to make a small plate. At this point, we can cover the little cup and the plate with a generous layer of acrylic gesso. This will make the surface more even both in color and texture. Next, we can paint our little espresso cup. I chose to paint it in a black and gold combo, and I'll have the acrylics I used linked in the description just in case you want to get them. Finally, we can coat the cup and the plate with a layer of clear varnish or nail polish. Time to move on to the next piece, which is very similar to the first one. We'll just have to glue these 2 layers together to make the base of our little cup. Then we'll cut this part, press it against a wet sponge, and then roll it against a paintbrush to give it a round shape. We'll connect the 2 ends with this little paper rectangle. And then we'll cover the resulting piece with this part. At this point, we can attach the top and bottom parts of the cup together. And then we'll have to cut this part a bunch of times and we'll glue all the layers together to make a small handle, which we'll then glue to the cup. Just as we did for the first cup, we're gonna cover this one with a coat of acrylic gesso, then we'll paint it with acrylics. And I decided to paint a super simple holly wreath design because I wanted all these mugs to be Christmas inspired. Lastly, we'll just have to paint the cup with nail polish to give it a nice glossy finish. And we can also make a little plate to go with it, using the same parts of the template we used for the first cup. We can make it a 3rd piece of our set following pretty much the same process. We'll glue these 3 circles together. Then we'll use these strips to make the main part of the mug. We'll add this tiny strip to the top for an extra detail. Then we'll attach the top and bottom parts of the mug together. And finally, we'll cut this part to make a small handle, which we'll then glue to the mug. Once again, we'll have to cover the mug with acrylic gesso, and optionally, we can also use a bit of spackle to smooth out the edge at the base right here. Next, we'll paint the mug with acrylics, and to add a little festive touch, we can make a little Christmas tree sticker using this part of the template. Now, if you're cutting by hand, it may be easier to use a small paper punch like one of these. On the other hand, if you have a cutting machine like a Cricut, a Silhouette, or the M1 Ultra I'm using in this video, you can use my digital templates and you'll find them in my shop, linked in the description. I've also been working on a 3D printed version of these mugs and they're not quite ready yet, but as soon as they are, the STL files will be available in the shop as well. So keep an eye out if that's something you're interested in. When the paint is fully dry, we can coat our little mug with a touch of clear nail polish. At this point, I think we have built enough skill to move on to something a little more elaborate. To make this little Santa mug, we're gonna start by cutting these two circles, which we'll then glue together. Then we'll use these strips to make the main part of the mug, just as we did for the other one. Next, we'll have to cut this strip, and as always, we'll have to dampen it with water, and then we'll glue it around the previous part aligned at the bottom. And as you can see, this will leave a small rim at the top. Next, we're gonna cut these three parts, and we'll glue them around the rest of the mug in this order. At this point, we can glue the top and bottom parts of the mug together, and finally, we'll make a little handle with this part. Just as we did for all the other mugs, we're gonna cover this one with a layer of acrylic gesso first. And then we'll have to carefully paint the Santa design using the edges of all the different parts of the template as a sort of guide. Last but not least, we'll coat the whole piece with a layer of clear nail polish. To make a lid for our little Santa mug, we'll start by cutting this long strip into copy paper, and then we'll carefully roll it around the top of the mug, adding glue as we go, but making sure we don't glue it to the mug itself. We should end up with this little ring. Next, we're gonna cut this teeny tiny strip. We'll dampen it with water, and then we'll glue it around the little ring this way. After that, we'll cut these parts and we'll attach them to the paper ring like this. Finally, we'll simply have to cover the lid with a layer of acrylic gesso and paint it with acrylics. Time to move on to the next piece, a travel mug. First, we'll cut these two circles and we'll glue them together. Then, just as we did for all the previous pieces, we'll use these parts to make the main portion of the mug, which we'll then glue to its bottom this way. Next, we'll have to cut this part and we'll glue it around the mug's base, aligned at the bottom. Then we'll cut this part and we'll glue the two pieces to the mug this way. Lastly, we'll use this part to make a handle, which we'll then glue to the mug. Once again, we'll have to cover the mug with acrylic gesso, and then we'll paint it with acrylic paints. And keeping with the Christmas theme, I cut a little snowflake into copy paper, painted it gold, and then I glued it to the mug. Lastly, we can coat the mug with clear nail polish to make it look super shiny. To make a lid, we'll have to cut this strip into copy paper, and just as we did for the Santa mug, we'll roll it around the top of this mug, being extra careful not to glue it to the mug itself. Next, we'll cut this part. We'll have to stack the three layers together like this. And finally, we'll attach them to the little paper ring. Lastly, we'll simply have to paint the lid with acrylics. We can now move on to the next piece, a Stanley cup. Once again, we'll start by cutting these two circles, which we'll have to glue together. Then we'll use these parts to make the first half of the cup, this way. We're gonna do the same thing with these teeny tiny parts, which we'll then glue to the first half of the cup. And yet again, we'll repeat the exact same process for these parts. We should end up with this. Next, we're gonna make a handle with this part and we'll glue it to the mug like this. And well, you know the drill by now. We're gonna cover the whole mug with acrylic gesso and then we're gonna paint it. And I made another little snowflake sticker for the design. After we've coated the mug with nail polish, we can cut this little circle a few times and then we'll stack all the layers together until we get to a thickness of roughly 4 mm. Next, we'll have to cut this little strip, we'll dampen it with water and then we'll attach it to the rest of the lid like this. We're gonna repeat the same steps for this second strip. And finally, we'll have to paint the lid with acrylics. And our collection of miniature mugs and cups is ready. As promised, here's a link to the free printable template. And if you're in the mood for more holiday-themed miniatures, you may enjoy these videos next. And this is all for today. Until next time, bye!